Hello and welcome to Permission to Be. I'm your host, Becka Eppley, joined today by my good friend and co-host, Tommy Allgood. Permission to Be exists to be a space of hope for those journeying to find their true, authentic selves. We hope that the story shared here will inspire you on your own journey and help you unlock the permission to be who you have always truly been.
Hello and welcome to Permission to Be. It's so good to be with y'all. Tommy here. Got Becka on the other side of town because we're recording this online. How's it going, Becka?
Hey, welcome to social distancing.
Yeah. We are more than our 6 feet apart, so we are following guidelines.
And then some.
We have our Zoom up and I am Zoom meeting out, so.
Right. Oh my gosh.
I'm really excited about today's conversation. A few weeks ago, we met this really awesome person by the name of Corey Gaston. Just want to introduce you to him today. Corey is a professional musician. He shared the stage with a varietal mix of some of the world's finest musicians, including Maynard Ferguson, Ron Canoli, Travis Cottrell, Tom Smith, Donald Lawrence, and the Tri-City Singers, Maurette Brown Clark, and Bill and Gloria Gaither. In addition to these fine musicians, he was asked to tour with legendary artist Prince and the New Power Generation in 2012, but chose his career as a Christian educator over full-time touring. Corey holds a master's degree in organizational leadership from Clark Summit University and a bachelor's degree in theology from Freedom Bible College. And he is currently pursuing his Doctor of Strategic Leadership at Liberty University. In addition to that, he has graduated from the U.S. Naval School of Music and holds certification in trumpet performance. The word proximity, according to Merriam-Webster, is the quality or state of being proximate or closeness. Most would assume that this only deals with distance from one point to another, but they would miss a much broader and deeper meaning of the word. Corey is the author of a book called Proximity. This work will focus on how close you do or do not find yourself to others within your community, churches, neighborhoods, civic organizations, and etc. The work of proximity is kingdom work designed to close the gaps that present themselves specifically within the body of Christ. This has always been purpose to draw us closer with the hopes of drawing those not in relationship with Christ closer to that point because of testimony of present unity. Welcome to Permission to Be, Corey. What an honor and pleasure to have you.
Hello.
That was a marathon bio. Like, you are so accomplished, my friend. You are so accomplished. That's incredible.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
You know, we were having a conversation beforehand, and also, like, this is sort of David Roberts, our other co-host. We talk frequently about this, but we were talking about like titles and credentials and sort of these qualifications. And you have so many titles and so many credentials, and you are so qualified. But do you want to give them a little insight into some of the conversation we were having surrounding that before?
Yeah. So we were talking a little bit before about a group of ladies, very qualified ladies that speak truth to power in organizations, specifically within the body of Christ. And they speak directly to the history of complicity and supremacy and things of that nature. And without their credentials, I doubt they would be invited to do the speaking in the places that they're asked to be a part of. And it's ironic to me that from some of the places that they receive their credential they're going right back to the places that support them to speak about these power structures. And if they were just ladies in the congregation or just in the back row of the sanctuary, they would not be given the time of day. But because of their pedigree, they are validated. And I think that's unfortunate that you have to have these things that then qualify you to speak about things that matter and things that directly affect you. So akin to that is, this may sound funny, but to speak about my experience as a Black man, my 41 years of living is not enough in the body of work. So my 41 years, in addition to my education and the research that I've read by other people, is then thus what qualifies me. And so it's not necessarily my experience alone, which cannot be discounted. It's my personal experience. When I was in grad school, I remember reading this book. It was in one of my counseling classes. And a lot of the class did not enjoy the content of this particular book. It was called Counseling the Culturally Diverse by Dr. Sue and Sue. And the majority of their research was first person account. Right?
Yeah.
But the irony is that if I were to give the same account to the people in the class, my firsthand account, it was not validated unless it was in book form. And I found it ironic that we were dissecting and digesting firsthand accounts that had just been published by 2 PhDs. And their body of work was all personal experience. And so I'm like, hold on, guys. We could have saved $198 on this book. And we could have gone to Starbucks for 2 hours and $5. And you could have gotten the same experiential recount that we just read in this book that you didn't like. But for a lot less money and a lot less credential, you could have gotten the same thing by speaking to a number of minorities in our country that would have given you the same eyewitness accounts of their life. And so that's kind of the irony in the whole validation of a person's experience and perspectives, that we give credibility to the educational aspect of it, even if it's personal. And so it's just kind of that dichotomy there.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was reading somebody's perspective, and they were talking about how, not that I don't view it as a negative thing, living sort of in the information age or the education age, but it's interesting how we prioritize education over freedom, but then also put controls in place on who has access to that education. And I remember the first time we chatted, that was something that came up in terms of I've always thought about it would be really cool to go into a doctoral program or something, but I also feel a bit of resistance to that for that reason of, I don't necessarily want to exist in a world or a space where the predominant culture of whiteness says, well, you need this, this, and this for us to even hear and see you. And you had some interesting perspectives on even that in terms of how people see and hear you.
It's interesting. So, a lot of things have changed since we first talked. Well, not much has changed, but just more information, more insight. And W.E.B. Du Bois, he fought during a totally different time that, none of us were alive to remember. But he, in essence, what my grandparents would say, he played the game to get ahead. And once he got ahead, he changed the game for those that could come behind him, right? So Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, they suffered a type of discrimination that I'll never know, but they did so in such a way that then afforded others the opportunity to come behind them. So now we can speak about them and their struggles and the legacies that they left, from these wonderful historically Black colleges and universities that have wrought men and women through generation after generation because they played the game. And so I think of being able to do stuff today to help shape and shift and change a climate for those that can come after me, or even while I'm still yet living, is important. And so truthfully, getting the education is important, but unfortunately, being heard is much more important. So doing the work, doing that necessary sacrifice so that those that hear you, who have the power to affect change, do, I think is really, really important. And so being in those spaces, being in those conversations, being asked to the table doesn't come by happenstance, because face it, the people that are at those tables are qualified. And so to be there with them, to give voice and to give insight is incredible. And especially when you begin to see the needle moving, you know. And so Dr. Du Bois and Booker T. Washington, they did the struggle as well in their own way at a different time. But now we can look back and we can see the Thurgood Marshalls, and we can see the people that have come up through the ranks. We can see the Alex Haleys, you know, and we can see their impact and contributions to our society, and how that has moved the needle yet further. And so I love one of my favorite quotes is from Denzel Washington. In order to do what you want to do, you have to do what you have to do. And that's so important, you know. So students hate school, but they want the car, right? They want the job, they want the house. They may hate shooting layups, but they want to make it to the NBA, right? So you got to do these necessary things to get to where you want to go. And so once you're there, just don't waste it.
Yeah. Wow, that is such a profound framing of sort of the motivation, where I think the experience of Blackness can have us in different emotions at different times, where we want to be rebels in one moment and challenging every aspect of the system, but then also advocates and reformers and changing the system from within. That was such an insightful reflection on what was required for some of our historical greats to have to reform and change the system of white supremacy culture from within, and not necessarily a perspective in my young millennial ignorance that I would necessarily have thought about. So thank you for articulating.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
It's my pleasure.
How does that sit with you, Becka?
It feels like a double-edged sword for the Black community, because there is pedigrees that need to be obtained to sit at the table, but the amount of work for the BIPOC community to get to the point of even obtaining a degree is so much greater than it is for a person who lacks melanin in their skin. There are systems in place that there's not a lot of people in the BIPOC community who maybe have a relative who is going to scoot them in to the right college to get the right education. How does it sit with me? It makes me frustrated. It makes me frustrated because it tells me in very clear answers why there is lack of diversity at the larger table.
Yeah. I mean, and you brought up such a great point just with even our education system. I love in How to Be Anti-Racist by Ibram Kendi. He talks about how the education system was built to uphold and preserve white supremacy and to sort of white supremacy. And also my partner also talks about how even some of the practices of like walking in a straight line is just training kids for like factory work, to be producers, to be workers, for those that hold power or the capital in a capitalist society. But even down to like standardized testing was meant for whiteness to succeed and to thrive. The way that we teach people to read, the way we teach math, and how we teach people how to take a test, even measure that as some metric or lens of competency, but throw away all of the other gifts and talents and intellect that is able to bubble up forth in other ways. Corey, like, are you like a dean of students? You work in education, right? Like, did you get to? I don't know if you're familiar with How to Be Anti-Racist, or if you were able to read that. But like, I guess like let's talk about some of those inequities as they like arise or present themselves in the education system.
So, education is a quagmire. It is such a quagmire. So, what we have the tendency to do in education is we try to fix a problem from the point that we find ourselves in now, right? so we don't address root causes well. We do not look at the histories that have, it's like a doctor, right? So I'll use a current situation that I'm currently dealing with, right? So I got high blood pressure. It's hereditary. I didn't know it because I'm adopted. And so my high blood pressure took effect and really made me really, really dizzy and headaches, and left arm was tingling, on the edge of a stroke, had no clue. And so I called my doctor, went to the hospital and had my blood pressure taken, and it was 196 over 102.
Oh, Lord have mercy. You just said that to a nurse, and I'm like,
So,
where's the labetalol? Where's the hydroxy?
yes, you understand the severity of that. Now, an average Joe Schmo, you tell them those two numbers, systolic over diastolic, they don't understand that doctors and nurses want your blood pressure 120 over 80 at the highest and somewhere lower if possible. And so for a person who was hypertensive but did not know it, I was living with this struggle and just living life. And then my doctor told me, if you don't make a change, sir, you will die before the age of 50. So I began to correct something then, but the root of that was something that I could not control, my heredity. Right. So, but what I can do now is to make changes today to live in such a way that would afford me the opportunity to see those years and beyond. And then, of course, I have children that are also sharing my heredity that I can help inform and educate them and say, hey, this is something you're going to have to worry about later on in the future. And it may show up in this way or it may not, because you have mommy and daddy both to contend with. And who knows what may show up later in life. This was never an issue for me. I mean, this was not the first time I'd ever gone to a doctor, right? So it popped up out of the blue. But now I began to exercise and to eat better. And of course, the doc put me instantly on medication because they had to regulate that lower, that diastolic, so diastolic dysfunction, had to get that under control. But once we corrected it, I then had to consider that there was a history there that got me there. And so poor eating choices, sedentary lifestyle, and things of that nature. Even though I was a Marine prior, it didn't matter. That work was done. And so I needed to get back into it and make some changes, right? We do the same thing in education without ever looking behind us. We fix today. We say, well, students have low achieving test scores, or these students aren't performing well. Let's fix that problem without looking at the history of the problems, right? So another thing I did when I was in grad school is I researched the inequities of students and how they're disciplined based off of culture, color, and gender. And 3-to-1, Black girls, brown girls are disciplined harsher than their counterparts, 3-to-1. And so, like nationwide. So for the same infraction in the same school, Black and brown girls are treated harsher 3 times to 1. So that's the summation of the study. But if you look at the history of how we got to some of these inequalities, when Brown v. Board of Education was signed in 1954, and then Ruby Bridges desegregates the first school in 1960, the average age of the teacher was 40 and a half. So in 1960, that means that these teachers were born around 1920, right? There's a lot of biases that come with a person through the history of our country that have informed their view of people, their view of children, what some kids can and cannot learn. Let's not forget eugenics theory, which was medically accepted in our country, that said that certain people, based off of ethnicity alone, are intrinsically smarter than others. And even though that's false, that was an ingrained truth, air quote, truth, that pervaded throughout the culture. And so you have educators that are now welcoming students. By welcoming, I mean they were forced by federal law to allow students of color into these spaces. But the first day that student, Ruby Bridges, entered the doors of the school in Louisiana, 300 students left. So, and the footage is atrocious if you want to take a peek at it, right? So you have all these biases and all these things that shape the way that people treat other people in school. So we talk about separate and equal, right? SED v. Ferguson and all these landmark cases that have built a system of inequality. And now when we're in schools, we see how some schools are funded and some schools are underfunded. Some schools are resourced and some schools are under-resourced. Some communities are treated better and some communities are treated worse. And it's never quite over the top, like overt in your face. It's more, insidious. And so these things still have effects. So when you look at failing schools, they're not just failing. They're failing because they don't have adequate resource. They've not been adequately resourced. They're failing because the students that are coming to the school are undernourished or malnourished. And so when they're in the classrooms, they can't really focus because they're hungry. And so the amount of time that they're able to do homework and study depends largely on the parents' education that they go home to study with, or if their parents are even home because of working multiple jobs, because 76% of America's working poor work more than one job.
Oh, yeah.
So you have in neighborhoods that are under-resourced and neighborhoods that are undernourished and they're underserved, you're going to have these problems. So you just can't throw money at the problem today. You have to look at the history of it and figure out how can we divert future generations from dealing with the same things. But if you never look at the history, you never look at the past, and we only try to fix today, then you're putting a Band-Aid on high blood pressure. You're not. If I only took lisinopril and metoprolol, which are medications that I take, and didn't make a change, I would still have high blood pressure. But I wouldn't actually, correct anything inside my body. I would only be giving it, a medicinal change, right? My goal is to not stay on medication. My goal is to get off and live a healthy lifestyle. So I do the things that I have to in order to eat sweet potato pie in Thanksgiving, because
yes, sweet potato pie.
Right? So I don't think it's either or. I think it's both and. You gotta address the situation today, but you also got to see how we got here, and let's fix those things so that they don't repeat in the future, and so that we can circumnavigate all that stuff. But that was a very long answer to get to that point.
So a little bit of a somber question and a point out here is you've laid all that out for us, and now we are dealing globally with COVID. And so now we have parents who are considered essential workers and their jobs, and they still may be doing 1 to 3 jobs and considered essential workers. And now you have all the children at home, and they are being expected to continue online schooling, which, let's just be really honest, that's absolutely ludicrous for most of the working class. It concerns me greatly. And I do sit in a very privileged position. I am home. I can work from home. So can my husband. But I am white, upper middle class. And so there's a fear that this is going to put us backwards several steps. It's going to put us backwards, and it's also going to bring a huge spotlight on the realities of how our schools function. And we can no longer hide from the fact that our schools are struggling and that they're not built, or they are not meant to go forward for every socioeconomic status. They're not meant to go forward in a cultural way, because there's many parents, they're non-English speaking, and they're now expected to teach their children American elementary, American middle. And I don't know. I'd love to know your thoughts on that.
So I think if nothing else, this pandemic is pointing out the flaws in several systems within our economy, within the country, and then, of course, our global economies as well. But specifically in the realm of education, I believe that this will forever change the way that we do education. And the reason I believe that is because it's already pointed out, and just in the 3 to 4 weeks that we've already been out of school and some of the new norms have taken residence, I believe that you saw within the first couple of weeks, school systems and districts trying to find a way to feed those kids, to feed those kids, because they realized that things that some people consider to be a no-duh, kids got to eat, but how? If they're at school and the population of Title I school attendees it does not change because the students are at home. I mean, you were broke at school, but you're
Mhm.
also going to be broke at home,
Mhm.
and that
Mm-hmm.
does not change. So you begin to see efforts nationwide to try to put into place school districts delivering with school buses and school bus drivers school lunches. And so I remember here within my area in Cabarrus County in North Carolina, which is where I'm located, they put up drive up spots to where parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles could get their students to one of those locations, about 15 or 16 spots around the county,
Mhm.
to where they could come and get breakfast and lunch, right?
Mhm.
I believe that shaped a little bit of the narrative because people that were, let me be honest and be kind, people that may have been against school lunch provision for students. Because remember, not only before this pandemic, we had people getting, bills sent to their home for overdue lunch account.
Ugh. Mm.
Right? So we had that, but that went away when.
I got triggered.
So, and then there were some that were like, well, if you can't pay, you can't eat. Right. And that was some of the things that I heard and saw on my friends list. And unfortunately, when this hit, it hit differently for people that were so dogmatic one side or the other. And I believe it put on display our humanity to where people became genuinely concerned, hopefully for their neighbors in a way that if that was your kid, you want them to eat, right?
Mhm.
You don't
Yeah.
want any kid to go hungry because they're not in school, because this is something that no one can help. And I think, if nothing else, that's what triggered our compassion to be invoked a little greater. It's because it wasn't just one population of kids; it's everybody.
Yeah.
And so there was a study that was done by the University of Chicago about 10, maybe 12 years ago, and it spoke about mirrored emotion. And Tommy, you'll get a kick out of this. Remember when the nurse was arrested a couple years ago for doing her job in Minnesota,
Oh yeah,
right?
we were hot.
Hot.
It was the first time for me personally that I felt like a lot of my coworkers experienced just a fraction of the rage that I do when I see police brutality on the
You hit
news.
the nail on the head, because everybody in your sphere of influence that are also employed and bear the same title of nurse felt like they were being physically attacked themselves, because they said, well, if that was me, I would have done the same thing that she did. And how dared they treat her that way? The University of Chicago School of Psychology labeled that as mirrored emotion. And mirrored emotion basically, it sums up that when you see yourself in a situation, you can put yourself there. So the ability to empathize is greater. So
Mhm.
for those of us men of color who see other men of color that are gunned down in the streets or
Mm.
treated unfairly for doing like very normal things like Starbucks, those things are not far from our reach, because it could literally be us at any given time. And so when my nurse friends, red, yellow, black, and white, all saw this lady in Minnesota being harassed and then arrested for
Mm.
doing her job, they instantly empathized because they saw herself in the situation. In the same way, when we began to realize that students of every color, of every nationality,
Mhm.
was going to be hungry, everybody's heart broke, because it wasn't just one community of these poor people that can't afford lunch. It's also the middle class kids whose parents can't afford to feed
Mm.
them as much as they need to be fed at home. So the school system and now all these social programs that some people boo-hoo are now needed. They're necessities. And so it has shifted in our minds, I believe, some of the narratives that we've built up around systems, because now it affected everyone.
Yeah.
And when it affects everyone and you're part of the everyone, I believe that no one is as quick to be so black and white on issues as we were before.
Mm.
And so I think that's why it will change the landscape, and hopefully it will change the landscape of access. We realize that internet can be free, and these internet service companies realize that every student who needs it at home in order to finish this fourth quarter, well, we'll provide it for free. This Zoom call that I'm on right now, I have a free account because I'm an educator, because I need to communicate with my students. There are so many things, and if I were an investor or a CEO of one of these companies, I'm not certain how many millions upon millions of dollars I'm losing, or if I'm losing money at all. I honestly don't know, but it seems to me that some of these things are very arbitrary
Yeah.
because there's a lot of things that we would charge an arm and two legs for that are now being given away without prejudice.
Mm.
And it makes me wonder, well, why is this so easy now? And I think the answer to that is because it's affecting everyone in a different way. And so I don't know, but I am concerned for next year's school openings because you're right, Becca. There are going to be students that are going to be severely left behind through this season who may not have the privilege of having a parent at home to help them with their schoolwork. I can tell you, having 4 kids in 3 different grade levels of school. I have 2 in elementary, 1 in middle, and 1 in high school. And my wife and I are very fortunate that she can stay home with our kids while I'm at the school, helping facilitate, educators to educate in a digital way, right?
Yeah.
But that's not everybody's story. That's not everybody's story. And so you have, like, you notice every grocery store is open, every gas station is
Right.
open,
Right.
every job that is providing a service of some sort. Basically, the working class of our economy is not at home.
Nope.
They are all considered essential because people got to have gas. So you got to be at the gas station. People have to eat. So the grocery stores must be open. And not only must they be open, the truck drivers who deliver the food must continue to operate. And so these people are still fully engaged. My father was a truck driver for 35 years. So when he drove long distance to provide services for others, that would be considered essential. I have friends and family members that are in medicine. They are at work.
Oh,
Their
yeah.
kids are at home. So the people that are performing the tasks that uphold our society are fully engaged for long hours. And their kids, on the other hand, are at home. We have students here within our school that cannot do their schoolwork until their parents get home in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a huge disadvantage. So if you've spent the entire day
At work.
and now Johnny has to do math, and Johnny has to read a short story, and Johnny has to write a synopsis of what he just read, and you have to put this all into a digital format and then upload it to show proof that you did the work. That's actually not education. That is going through the process, going through the motions to check off a box. Next year, when Johnny goes to the next grade level, if there's not some semblance of grace afforded by the educators in that classroom that realizes that there's going to be some things that Johnny and Susie's missed this last year, in addition to the trauma. Let's talk about the trauma of being sequestered in a home for 10 to 12 weeks. And that's just what we project at this moment.
Oh, I know, right?
That's serious mental trauma that is going to plague these children. And in addition to that, it's like, let's just talk about well, maybe we shouldn't talk about it. I don't know.
We can talk about it.
Come on now, say that.
Say it.
Come on.
I got students that are Asian that they're feeling some type of way. They're attacked, and their parents are shutting down businesses for fear of persecution by citizens. And so that brings an entire different discomfort that at this stage of my life, I don't have to deal with. I am not currently under attack. And by under attack, I mean persecution is an attack. I may not be physically being beaten, but mentally that takes a toll. And so when I spoke to one of my students yesterday who informed me that their parents had to shut down their restaurant because of some perceivable threats, that concerns me, because now that's going to play into their financial standing. And that's going to play into those students, the 3 of them at their home, on their emotional standing. And those things bother me. And so I think this point in history that we've never seen before, I've never lived through a pandemic, a global experience. This is going to change a lot of things for us. I think this is, for us in America's context, a worldwide 9/11.
Yeah.
Everything changed after 9/11. On 9/10/2001, you can go straight to the airport and walk right up to the gate and look at your bestie get on a plane. 9/12,
Nope.
there were metal detectors, armed guards, and here in 2020, that has not changed.
Mm-mm.
But students that were born in that time frame, they've only known the airport as the airport.
Yeah. I remember, like, used to be me and my parents' favorite thing to do when I was a kid is just to go into the airport, see the planes get pushed back, or go meet friends at the gate when they got off. I mean, it was so different, and I live in that space where I'm young enough and old enough just to like remember both. But even when you're talking about like this mirrored emotion and people's ability to empathize, it just speaks so much to how as a society we continue to vilify poverty, and we continue to vilify anything that's not white.
Yeah. And that narrative is continually being spoken and heard more than any other narrative, because that is still where the money is. The capital is in that narrative. And we have to change that.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you back for part 2.